Beep, 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 beep. Hello, all this new proof from the Jester. Hello, hello. It's great to see you. I've got something of interest today, but beeth warned, good jesters, good jesterites, it might be a bit of a meander. So if you're not up for a meander or you haven't got time, bookmark it, subscribe, bookmark, and watch me later, right? Okay, but I'm going to have a meander. I'm on a wander. Subscribe to me, YouTube or Substack. Become a warrior teacher. Yes, let's have you. Okay, become a warrior teacher. Other than that, let's move on. See, because there's a thing. There's a thing that's happened that's really interesting. And I thought it might be interesting because it's exactly the sort of thing that I'm attempting to teach the warrior teachers to spot. So I'm intrigued to know if you agree with what I'm going to say. So I'm not telling you I'm right. Right, I could just as easily be wrong. But it's fun having a go, innit, eh? So let's do a bit of analysis on something that's occurred that I think is terribly interesting. Okay? So here we go. Right, we'll start with this first. All the links, as usual, are in the Dubras. This is about Scotland again. Oh, the gift that keeps giving. Hey, Donald wisheth truthers. It's the gift that keeps giving. Okay, Scotland. Scottish University, this is from the Scotsman newspaper, mind. Scottish University ridiculed over trigger warning applied to Peter Pan. J.M. Barrie. What? Come on. Peter Pan. Trigger warning. Right, a Scottish university has been ridiculed for introducing a trigger warning for Peter Pan, suggesting the popular children's fantasy could be emotionally challenging to students. They need to get them out of the universities. What are they doing there? Right, universities are filtration systems for morons. Okay? They just need to filter them more quickly. They just want the money. They're all money obsessed now. What the hell has happened to them? Aberdeen University has included the enchanting tale by Scots author J.M. Barrie in a list of titles that may leave undergraduates needing help if they aren't able to cope with the content. Right? This is about a boy, right, who if he tells lies, gets a big nose. I know people that want to sit on his face. Right? That gets a big nose, right? And a cricket called Jiminy. Right? Is it? It is, isn't it? That's what it's about. Well, that's what it appears to be about. If that's what it's about, why have they got the trigger warning on it? Why do they think it needs a trigger warning? Bear that thought in mind as we meander further. Right? Okay. Other books which students may find upsetting include The Railway Children. God, I was in love with Jenny Agutter when I was a child. She was great in The American Wolf in London. Do you remember that when she was the nurse? The Railway Children by Edith Nesbit and The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. Even Hollywood heartthrob George Clooney has not escaped the censors with a warning in place for his Middle East political thriller, Syriana. You imagine these students would melt into the ground if they watched Seven or Salo or I Spit on Your Grave or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. What are they doing pampering to these stupid students? I suggest most of the students don't need it. I think, it's the usual grievance crowd, isn't it? Right? Uncovered through a Freedom of Information request. Aberdeen University has begun issuing trigger warnings for Peter Pan's dramatic adventures in Neverland, suggesting the content could be emotionally challenging to students who should seek help if they feel unable to cope with it, right? They're creative victims. Remember that, okay? As we meander, this goes places you don't expect, so be ready, right? Keep up. Right, here we go. The university goes no further to explaining the reasons for its intervention, other than to say that Barry's book, not me, J.M. Barry's book, contains odd perspectives on gender. So we're now protecting students, we're adults by the way, from odd perspectives. Have you experienced an odd perspective? Call us for a no-win, no-fee consultation. So they had odd perspectives on gender, but no objectionable material. Can you see what they're doing? Bear with me. Okay. The intervention was condemned by Scots MP and former Aberdeen University graduate Andrew Bowie. Right? He said, I am baffled by any decision to warn students away from its study. Undergraduates should be sufficiently intellectually mature to understand and appreciate the tension between innocent experience at the centre of Peter Pan. There's a man who gets it. Right? Party colleague Stephen Kerr, Scottish Conservative Shadow Education Secretary, said, "This kind of mollycoddling, warning on J.M. Barrie's magnificent story and other basically innocuous children's classes, especially when directed at students supposedly engaged in higher intellectual discussion, risks making the university look preposterous." Risks? They are preposterous. The universities are in thrall to a cabal. See what I did there? I'm going to say it again. They are in thrall to a cabal. And what they need to reduce, because these people will write these ridiculous processes and procedures and write these trigger warnings. What they need to do is introduce something that is kryptonite to the crap they write. Oh, I'm poetic this morning. It's only 4:30. They introduce something kryptonite to their crap they write. Stop amusing yourself, Barry. This is for the benefit of others. So anyway, they got this freedom of information request through. There's a number of other ones they've done it with too, but I'm going to focus in particular on Pinocchio. And there's a reason that I'm going to do that. The University of Aberdeen spokesperson, when asked to justify this ridiculous overparenting nonsense, said, "Similar to the way that content warnings are routinely applied by broadcasters, students are informed about the content of the text, and as critically mature adults, they are empowered to make their own decisions about which text to read." Right? They are exactly the opposite of what they say they are. Right? So let's think about that statement. Similar to the way that content warnings are routinely applied by broadcasters. There's nothing similar about it at all. Broadcasters send it out and everybody can get it. This is a university where we're trying to toughen people up to be resilient and the best they can be. So that's rubbish. Students are informed about the content of the text. By whom? Who reads it? Who decides what interpretation is right? You and your ideologues? What a surprise. The gender identity ideologues and the queer theorists have got their hands on Aberdeen University. No surprise here. And as critically mature adults, they're empowered to make their own decision about which text to read. They're not empowered about it. They're not. Because to be empowered is to mean, you do it on your own. Not have you do it for them, you bunch of nannying farts. Right? So it's not empowering them. What they say that they are doing is the opposite of what they are doing. What they are in fact doing is ideologically indoctrinating them and doing so, then saying that they're doing the same as if somebody says there may be violence in this film. Right? That's what they're doing. Trigger warnings. Trigger warning on Peter Pan. They need to get in the bin. Right? Get in the bin. Our guidelines, they continue, on content warnings were developed in collaboration with student representatives. There we go. Stop asking the lunatics what they want. Stop doing this. Oh, it's important that we engage with the students. They don't know a thing. They're 18 years old. That's why they've come to you. Stop acting as if they know anything. They don't know a damn thing. They're an empty vessel, ready to be filled. There was rather a good article by Lionel Shriver about this, actually, in the last couple of days. I'll see if I can find it and put it in the Dubries. But anyway, our guidelines on content warnings were developed in collaboration with student representatives, and we have never had any complaints about them. And on the contrary, students have expressed their admiration for our approach. Liars! It will be the same students that express their admiration are the ones who went, "We want you to do this nonsense." Stop pampering to these delusional, divisive, dangerous elements in your university and get them out. Give them their money back and tell them to go home to their safe space. Okay, so warnings on Peter Pan. Park that. We're going to meander. Park that. We're going to meander. Okay? A few months back, there was a kerfuffle occurred around Drag Queen Storytime. And I did a series of videos, which you'll find on my, on my YouTube channel. Trying to explain the difference between drag, which is old school drag, right? Which, harmless, nobody wanted to do it for children, and what's called queer performativity, which is what Drag Queen Storytime is, queer performativity, performed by the likes of ADHD and all these people that are trying to get in front of the kids. And part of the shtick that I put together in my little thing was, look, it's not so much that they could be dressed in suits and saying what they're saying to the young people and children, and they'd still be a problem, because it's the narratives that are the issue. And I used a particular example of that being a Little Red Riding Hood. Now, it's an old story. Little Red Riding Hood goes back a long way. So I've done a Substack on that to go with this, right? So you can read the Substack. And it's important to recognise that Little Red Riding Hood is a distilled story designed to warn children not to trust other people. Right, it's a really important one because that's how you start. You get children not to trust people, then parents gradually let them out. And what they do with their queer performativity, they go into the schools and they take things like Little Red Riding Hood and they distort them so that grandma becomes the bad guy and the wolf's the good guy in the name of inclusivity. Do you get it? Right, okay. Now, some of you may or may not remember a film called The Company of Wolves, which I've put in the Substack along with, I mentioned that, and The Crying Game. Remember The Crying Game? Where there was a beautiful woman that actually was a feminine, beautiful man who eventually at some point revealed his, meat and two veg. All his danglers came out and everybody went in the cinema, whoo! The shock horror. It was like a sort of reveal, But it was about identity. And Neil Jordan, who directed Company of Wolves and The Crying Game, was quite interested in the idea of identity at the time. Company of Wolves is great because it's about this young girl. It's a very British telling of the story, and it's beautifully evocative and gothic and colourful. And if you haven't seen it, have a look, right? But it's got some fantastic stuff in it. There's Angela Lansbury plays the grandmother. And what was it she said? Now is then 'tis simple truth. The sweetest tongue has sharpest tooth. Never a truer word spoken. And then follows up with, and some men are hairy on the inside. It's a warning. It's a warning about wolves. And it's true warning, as in Little Red Riding Hood is a warning about wolves, right? Okay? Don't trust them. That's what it's about. It's about telling young people, well, children, very young children, that you don't trust people. Trust your grandmother. Right? There's a reason that story is told that way, because it's archetypal and it's so old, and it's been told for years and years and years and years. It's the distillation of our understanding of how you raise a child. Now, queer performativity, as in Drag Queen Story Hour, goes into these Drag Queen story things and tells everybody that grandma's the bad guy and the wolf is the good guy. That is done to deliberately subvert the narratives that guide people through childhood. Are you with me? So guiding people through childhood narratives attacked by queer theorists and gender ideologues because they don't like the family. They want to make everything about being queer and different, the opposite of what it should be. It's all this madness in their minds that they can create the world through language. Are you with me so far? So let's go back. Let's go back now to the university with the trigger warning. The trigger warning and the queer performativity in so-called drag queen storytime are the same thing. Exactly the same thing. There's a great statement in the article about the trigger warning in the Scotsman that says the following, right? It says, as I mentioned earlier, from Andrew Bowie, who's the Scots MP, I am baffled by any decision to warn students away from its studies. Undergraduates should be sufficiently intellectually mature to understand and appreciate the tension between innocence and experience at the heart of Peter Pan as a story. Absolutely right. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing. The same end result is wanted. Deny access to archetypal stories and narratives that push or enforce what they see, the queer theorists and gender ideologues, as heteronormativity, which is the vessel in which they place everything they hate, right? So drag queen storytime, this blatant with drag queen storytime, and they go, right, we're going to tell you what it really is like, because all that's rubbish, that's heteronormative rubbish. You've got to embrace men dressed as women and sticking, marrows up your backside, or whatever it is they're telling them half the time, okay? But they could be dressed in a suit doing it, remember that? It's the narratives that are important. On the other hand, you've got the trigger warnings. But what the trigger warnings are doing is saying is, you might not want to read this book about how you might want to best grow up, because that's what Pinocchio is about. So the MP said, I'm aghast, I'm baffled. I'm not baffled. I'm not baffled. I've got a feeling I know how this has happened. I know, and I wish I had a way of finding out. So I will share it with you, and you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong. I think there's some grievance gerbil at Aberdeen University, right? One of these they-thems, whatever they are, and they've come across the lecture by Jordan Peterson about the importance of Peter Pan in the development of children. And if you haven't seen the lecture, I recommend you do it. It's a very good lecture. It's one of his best. It's in the Dubris, as usual, in the Substack. Yep, so you can get the links downstairs. In which he explains all about how Pinocchio is about how to grow up well, which is what the MP recognises. That's what Jiminy Cricket, JC, Jesus Christ. Yeah, there's the conscience. Yeah, the conscience. So there's a lot of religiosity in there, but the story is nevertheless valid. Don't become a donkey. So that, that's what it is. So the trigger warning is designed to stop them from reading that kind of foundational story that says here how you might want to best live your life. That's the trigger warning. Drag queen story time is to disrupt them knowing that story in the first place at the very beginning. It's the same people doing the same thing. There's no difference between the two. Now you go do your bit of research, you go and read what I've written, you have a think, and you go and watch a bit of Jordan, and you tell me if I'm wrong. Ta-da, Jesterites!